Hi, Mohammed. Can you hear me?
Yes. Good morning,
Great.
Pauline. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. What would you like me to call you? I didn't want to refer to you by the wrong name.
It's okay,
Mohammed's fine? Great.
So first of all, let's make a very short
Hi, Mohammed. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can hear me.
Good morning.
I can hear you. And can you hear me?
Good to see you too. What would you like me to call you? I didn't want to refer to you by the wrong name. I think I've done something. Did I start record or something like that?
No, not necessary. So now everything is fine. So first of all, let me quickly introduce you to our audience, but our audience already know you. I would like to
everyone.
Pauline Cullen, the author of best-selling IELTS book. It's very popular in Uzbekistan as well, Official Guide to IELTS. And she'll be making a presentation about IELTS writing, because IELTS writing is perhaps the most sensitive topic in general. And also we'll make a presentation of a new book, Key to IELTS Writing, which I use myself. So speaking from my experience, I can say it's a brilliant book. Thank you. So now turn to you, Pauline. You can start.
Okay. Am I allowed to share my screen, Mohammed?
No, I will.
It says it's disabled, so I need to have that enabled so I can run my PowerPoint.
Yeah, sure. Just a second.
Okay.
Can you do it now?
Let me have a look. Share screen. Yes, great. So I'll just do this a moment. So is everybody here?
Yes, we can see your presentation. Go
Okay,
ahead.
Great. I'm just going to get rid of this. So can everybody see the screen okay? Yep.
Yes, we can see.
Great. Okay, what I've done is I've made a PowerPoint and used a little cartoon of myself to help. So at the start, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background, and I'll show you how to ask questions and things at the end. I've allowed some time, hopefully, for questions at the end. So I'm going to start with some information about me, because I don't like to assume everybody knows who I am. Then I'm going to talk about key problems with IELTS writing. Then I'll talk about solutions, and then my new book, The Key to IELTS Writing Task 2. So, Pauline, why should we listen to you? Is a very good question you should be asking, because this is an extract from a talk I gave about reading true, false, not given questions. And this was back in 2016, and you can find the video of that on my website. And at that time, back in 2016, there were 23,000 results if you searched for the term IELTS expert on Google. And now in 2021, we can see the number has increased enormously. Sorry, I'm just trying to get rid of this bit here, Mohammed. Is there a way to do that? I'll move it there. Okay, that's perfect. Sorry, I didn't want you to not be able to see the captions. So in 2021, you can see that that number of IELTS experts has increased enormously. And so with all these experts on IELTS, it's amazing. It should be very easy for us to get information about IELTS, shouldn't it? So also there are 192,000 videos that are promising to boost your IELTS score. And really what this tells us is that there's an awful lot of free information, but it's not necessarily good information about IELTS. So a bit of background about myself. I studied languages at high school and at university, and then became a language teacher. And then I became a speaking test examiner for the Cambridge English exams. I was an examiner for probably almost 20 years for all of those exams. And in the early 1990s, I became an examiner for IELTS speaking and writing when it was introduced to Australia. And then I moved on to test writing. And I've written 7 IELTS preparation books, as well as 2 vocabulary teaching apps. And 4 of my books are now in their 2nd edition. Later this year, you should be able to find the 2nd editions of my grammar and vocabulary books. And when I'm writing these materials, I wear all of my hats. So that's the hat of the language student, the language teacher, and the test writer. And you might also know me from Inside IELTS, which is a free course on Future Learn. I highly recommend it if you have students who don't know anything, or if you have teachers who don't know anything at all about IELTS. It's a very good introduction to the IELTS test. And some of you may know me from social media, where I've been answering questions about IELTS since 2011. So over the past 10 years, I've been talking to teachers and candidates online, and that's led me towards focusing more on IELTS writing. And because as Mohammed said, that's the main problem with IELTS at the moment. And this is also where I learned about this confusing world outside of IELTS. And as I go through it, I know a lot of these ideas are quite complex and there's a lot to get through in the time. So please make a number of the slide if I refer to anything that's a little bit confusing or something you're not sure about, or if I start to talk too quickly. I'm always conscious of trying to get through enough information to allow for a Q&A at the end. So please make a note of any particular slides that you'd like me to go back to or like me to answer questions about. And you'll see here what I've done with my cartoon. The cartoon, Pauline, will basically say essentially what I'm saying to you. So I don't want this to be the longest listening test you've ever taken. So you can use these captions here to help keep track of the message and the information I'm giving. Okay, so we're going to start by looking at key problems with IELTS writing. And problem one is the myths, misunderstandings, and misinformation about IELTS. Back in 2014, I published, with Cambridge University Press, the official Cambridge Guide to IELTS, and that work took, probably about a year and a half to produce the book. And the idea at the time was to tell people everything they needed to know about the test. Sorry, I've gone back. And the expectation was that it would solve everybody's problems with IELTS. That was really how I felt. I thought, this is great. Now no one's going to be confused. Everybody's going to know what to do and how to study for the test. But the reality was closer to this, where people actually didn't. It surprised me that people didn't actually want to listen to what I was saying or to the information, that I was giving in webinars and things like this, because instead, people tend to turn to the free and cheap and easy materials they can find online. And we can see the results of this. This is a message I got in January 2021. So that's 7 years after the publication of the official guide. And you can see from this message that people still feel frustrated and confused about IELTS. So the message says, who can show us the right way to learn about this test? This is what I find frustrating. There are lots of guides or coaching centers, but we don't know who to follow or what to focus on. So that idea of what to focus on is what I want to talk about today. So my experience online showed me that for a lot of candidates, IELTS is an enormous obstacle in their path. So the future is beyond that. And this mindset is a key part of the problem because people look for a way around an obstacle like this. And when you search online for answers, the test is presented as though it's this confusing puzzle that you're going to solve. And they tend to use this type of language when they talk about it, that we will help you to solve the IELTS and so on. And this brings us back to the source of many of these problems, which is the belief that we can find a cheap and easy answer to any problem online. So this is a search for IELTS practice tests, and you can see an enormous number of results for that. So it's important to understand and to remember that online platforms rely on advertising and getting your attention in the same way that humans rely on oxygen to breathe. So if people say we need more practice tests, then more tests are going to appear online to get your attention. When there is a big demand for something, the internet will always deliver it. And if people say we need more videos showing tricks, then more videos with tricks appear. And the result of that is people retake the test, but still get the same score. And so we have this vicious circle produced, again, largely because of this free version of IELTS. So this brings us neatly to the next problem, which is using the wrong practice test materials. And to understand why this is a problem, it's important, or it can help to look at a good example first. So putting my test writer hat on again, this is a typical example of a writing task 2 question. And sorry, I'm just wondering if, yeah, everyone can hear me okay. All right. So this is a typical writing task 2 question. There are now millions of cars on the road in most big cities. Pollution from cars is the most important problem that should say, big cities face today. To what extent do you agree or disagree? So this is a typical writing task 2 problem, writing task question, sorry. And the job of the test writer is to produce fair, valid, reliable tests that will force you to use the skills you're going to be assessed on in the test. And the band descriptors tell us what is important here, so what these skills are. We know from the task response band 7 band descriptor that you need to address all parts of the task and you need to present a clear position throughout. So if you're aiming for this level, we know this is what you need to do, and these are the skills you're going to be assessed on. Test writers also have to think about the washback effect of the questions, and that means the impact they have on the classroom. What do these test questions force you or encourage you to focus on as students or as teachers? So this question, if we look back to our test question, it presents us with a topic that we need to discuss, which is that the pollution from cars on the road in big cities. And it gives us an argument that we know we need to make our position clear on. So that is whether or not this is the most important problem that big cities face today. And remember, we need to address all parts of this task. So we need to discuss the topic and present our clear position on this, whether or not this is the most important problem that cities face today. So in a real test question, all of this is very clear. But the free materials that you'll find online don't force you to show these same skills. So this is typical of something you might find online. There is a good deal of evidence that increasing car use is contributing to global warming and having other undesirable effects on people's health and well-being. What can be done to discourage people from using their cars? So these free materials you find online are not forcing you to show the skills that you need to show in the real test, and I'll show you why. So here, first of all, there is no connection between this first sentence here, the information we're given, and this question. And that means people are more likely to simply discuss how to discourage people from using their cars. And this means they would practice ignoring this part of the question here, increasing car use is contributing to global warming and having other undesirable effects on people's health and well-being. And if you're practicing addressing the task only partially, you're practicing band 5 task response. And band 6, some parts may be more fully covered than others. So this type of material encourages you to practice these lower level skills. But even more importantly than this, there is nothing here, there is no argument here that we need to make our position clear on. So you're also practicing not making your position clear. There's no argument being made in this question, so I don't have anything to make my position clear on. And this is perhaps why people reach the wrong conclusions about the test. So we find statements like this. The statements are just background information, you can ignore them. Sometimes you must only discuss the topic and you must not give your opinion. And these are people reaching conclusions about the test based on materials that they find online. We see the same problem in many videos about IELTS reading, with say things like this. They talk about common traps, comparisons, all, some, the majority. Or it's easy, you can guess 80% of the answers without reading. Or 3 matches means true, 2 matches means false, 1 match is not given. And we often see this word match used a lot in these videos about reading. And this trick is a very common one that I hear. Just eliminate all the silly options in multiple choice. In other words, the options that are just not mentioned in the passage. And that's supposed to make the test easier. And it all is to help you avoid reading too much. But you need to read and to develop those skills in order to do well in the test. And all of these ideas show us how people outside IELTS see the test. When I'm talking about the IELTS test, I'm only talking about the materials that have gone through a rigorous and painstaking process. And you can only find examples like this in the Cambridge IELTS test books 9 to 16. And people who are spotting patterns and giving conflicting advice and describing tricks and traps are talking about these other sets of materials that you find. So recent IELTS, actual real IELTS, something a famous IELTS expert said, or something written by a former examiner. We find all of these, some practice test from a test center and so on. We find an awful lot of these materials, as we saw with our Google search results before. And I often have people saying to me, but what about when it says? And these are the materials they're referring to when they say that. So like fast food, these materials can be produced quickly, and they're also very popular because they're free. And the fact that they greatly outnumber the real test materials is the main cause of confusion and misunderstandings about IELTS. And this includes with the writing test. So we can verify facts about the test by looking at real test questions, as I said, in books 9 upwards to 16, and by looking at the official version of the assessment criteria, and also information like this, which comes from the official website, and the address is here. And I will just point out, I don't recommend other sources, and that includes the official social media channels. So when people make changes to test questions or write their own test questions, this is where the problems start to come in. And people start to reach conclusions like these. And we hear people talking about a discussion essay or an opinion essay and saying that you need to address them in different ways. So for example, in a discussion essay, I've seen people say, you must only discuss the topic and you mustn't give your opinion. Or in an opinion essay, you must only write about the part you agree with. So these ideas are very confusing to me as someone who's worked with IELTS for an awfully long time. I don't understand these ideas, but they do come from outside of the test. And we know this because the facts that we have about the test tell us this is wrong. We know you must discuss the topic and present an argument that clearly explains your position. So each task 2 essay should be seen as a combination of whatever these ideas are. You must also always discuss and give your opinion. Giving firm rules about language also creates problems. I often see this one, that you must write in an academic way, and people interpret this to mean that you must only use the passive. And the people who follow this advice write sentences like this: it is felt, it is agreed, instead of I think or I agree. And this creates a problem because when you're being asked to give your own opinion, this does not help you to do that. In fact, it interferes with that. This doesn't tell me what your opinion is. Using the passive is not the right way to approach this. The next problem is what I refer to as a focus on form. And to try to help, I asked my daughter to create a picture of a car for me. So this looks like a car. It has 4 wheels, 2 doors, and 2 mirrors, but we can't actually drive it. So the focus on form is focusing on the features of a car, for example, without really understanding how the car works. So let's look at what I mean by a focus on form, which I think is a very real problem. When students demand something, their teachers and the internet will deliver it. So the result of this is a greater focus on form. So for example, we often have people looking at individual snatches and phrases from the band descriptors and saying, okay, I need to know less common words. And because of this, we have these lists of less common words appearing. Then they'll say, I need complex grammar. So then there's more focus on complex grammar points. And this leads to a stronger belief that this is the way to reach band 7 or the higher bands, because there's so many videos and so many posts about less common words or complex grammar and so on. So the demand for more lists grows, and so we get more and so on. So this again produces another vicious circle. But when we give lists of rules like this, we give lists of rules like this because students want lists. They want fixed rules. It's nice to think that you can learn in this way. And it makes teaching easier. And it's easy to assess writing when there are fixed rules. So if I tell you don't use simple words like these, use these less common words instead, and then I can just check, yes, you use the less common words, therefore you did a good job. And these, I often see rules like this: don't use words like firstly, to make your position clear throughout, write a thesis statement, and so on. I'm going to talk about the most important of these later. We see rules like this as well, the final one. In each paragraph, you must develop 2 to 3 ideas with an explanation and an example at the end of each one. This is a typical focus on form, so what it looks like rather than how it actually works. And because of these lists of rules that we find, some people actually go on to believe that the examiner has a list like this that they're using, and they tick off each one as they see it in your writing. But writing doesn't work like this, and writing assessment doesn't work like this. Also, following fixed rules or trying to follow these fixed rules means your students can't be flexible in the test. And this is another list somebody sent me that a teacher had said to them, you must have 6 instances of collocation, and you have to have at least 2 instances of inversion and 2 instances of reduction, and so on. So this focus on form, instead of thinking, what does this do? How does this impact your argument? What effect does this have on your writing? You have to always think, why am I using this? You know, what purpose is it serving? Instead of just ticking a box to say, yes, I have 2 instances of inversion. This is a focus on form. And when we do this, it means there's a tendency to focus on complex grammar points, but also on long, complex words. So this is the problem created by this focus on form. This is an extract from a website that says it will teach you how to get to band 8. And according to the website, this is band 6 language. This is what band 6 language looks like. This is band 7, and this is band 8, again, according to the website. And as you can see, it's a good example of the common belief that longer and more complex means, or longer longer and more complex is the same as better writing or a higher score. So I've highlighted how this website thinks vocabulary works as the levels go up. So computer-based games is referred to as band 6, whereas a band 7 supposedly would write electronic and simulation games. And by band 8, we're writing audio and visual games which are designed to be played on the computer. But in fact, the reverse is true. The longer extract is very typical of what we see at band 6.5. We're using far too many words to get across simpler meaning. The higher level writing is easier to understand and it's easier to read. I'm going to go into more detail now about this confusion about IELTS vocabulary. And a lot of these mistaken ideas come from misunderstanding the CEFR, which is the Common European Framework of Reference. And also some of these common terms here, which are from the lexical resource band descriptors. So the idea of less common vocabulary, awareness of style, flexibility, and precision. And people often don't understand what these terms mean. So the CEFR, just to I've used colors to try and show you the different levels. We have basic user, A1, A2, independent user, B1, B2, proficient user, C1, C2. And this is the common European framework of reference. And you often see this in dictionaries. So the Cambridge Online Dictionary, which I use a lot myself, and it's a very useful resource. It's completely free. And as you can see, this is the definition of the word easy, and it tells us this is A1. Okay, so this is an A1 word according to the EVP, and this is the English Vocabulary Profile, which is another very useful tool. I've got a link to the website in the next slide. It's a very useful tool, but it's a useful tool for people who are writing materials. Okay, so the EVP, the English Vocabulary Profile, is an invaluable reference. It's for anyone involved in syllabus design, as well as materials writers, test developers, teachers, and teacher trainers. So it tells you what students at this level are able to understand. So if you have a class at this level, you can make sure you are using words they will understand when you're producing teaching materials. This is the purpose of the EVP. It isn't a syllabus for Ielts vocabulary, which is what a lot of people try to use it for. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So many people misunderstand the levels, and they think that individual words work like this. So A1 has these short, simple words, and by C2, you're using these much longer, more complex words. And by this way of thinking, these people are thinking, I must use C1 to C2 vocabulary to reach the C1 to C2 level. But language isn't as neat and tidy as this. It's not how language works. The reality is closer to this. So we can see that there are a mixture of different lengths of words, if you like, and complexity. And we certainly do get a lot of the smaller words and shorter words here at the higher levels. And at B1 and B2, candidates are using some higher level words, but they're doing so without an awareness of style. And that's why it doesn't change their level. So it isn't about the words you know, it's about how you use them. And that's the best way to see vocabulary and the way that you approach the learning of it. So at level B2, they attempt to use less common vocabulary, but with some inaccuracy. And at band 7, we have sufficient range of vocabulary to allow some flexibility and precision, and they use less common lexical items with some awareness of style. So that's the difference between here and here. We're using the words, these longer words, without an awareness of style here. And by the time we get to the much higher levels, we're talking about precision and being flexible again. So let's have a look at what those words mean, this idea of flexibility. So I've tried to use Lego blocks to show that if you think about vocabulary as a tool that you have to use, like the bricks, like a Lego brick, and you can use it to create something. And typically at the lower levels, people are making that what we expect you to make with things like this. So they can use the blocks to create something that they would, something of a lower level, of a more basic a more basic sort of piece of writing that they can produce with it and do that very well. But when they attempt to use the higher level language, they do so without an awareness of style. And we see these words, these high level words, being inserted into the writing, often when they're not needed or where they don't belong, which is why it doesn't increase your score. But by the levels C1 and C2, so from band 7 upwards, candidates do know how to use the language in a way to present a clear picture. And this is what the flexibility and precision is talking about. It's being able to use the words you know to create a clear picture of something. And by the time we get to bands 8 and 9, the picture is even more precise and more natural. So that's what this idea of flexibility means. At B2, there is less flexibility. They can't present a clear picture with what they know. And at C1 and C2, they can use the language they know to present a clear picture. Okay, this idea of C1 to C2 and A1 to A2 is something I like people to think about a little bit more. So have a look at this list of words. I'm not going to test you on it. I just want you to think about it and think about which two of these words you think are A1 to A2 and which three of these words are C1 to C2. So the words I have are important, destruction, household, effective, broadcast, able, age, flat, and breaking. The answers might surprise you. The A1 and A2 words are the top and the bottom, important and breaking, and I deliberately chose three of the shortest words to have as the C2 ones. And what we mean here is that able has a C2 level meaning when it has the meaning of clever, when we say he's able and we mean he's clever. Age has this C2 level meaning when it's used to mean age old or with age. And if you say, I got a flat, meaning I got a flat tire, you're using flat with a C2 level meaning. So this is what the A1 to C2 levels actually mean. And I want to show you that in sentences now, in sentence form. So if I write this sentence, the risk of breaking a bone when you fall increases with age. So that's a C2 level meaning for the word age. And I've used three of our words here in a longer context to show it in the context of a writing task 2 essay. It's important for the elderly to be active. However, they need to be careful when playing sport because the risk of breaking a bone when you fall increases with age. And I've used color again to show you that this is band 9 writing, but the majority of the words are A1 to B2. And in fact, if I change the ending there so that it changes to increases as you get older, now all of the words are A1 to B2 according to the English vocabulary profile, but we still have band 9 writing. So this shows you that when it comes to producing language, it's much more accurate to think of high levels like this. C1 and C2 means a mastery of the language at levels A1 to B2. And it also shows that learning lists or teaching lists of less common words or high-level words to boost your score will not achieve your goal, because these are extracts from band 6 writing that show this nicely. I had a candidate I was helping and he said, oh, Mum, I'm sorry, I wrote declivity, but it should be declivitis. Declivity is not a word I have ever heard before. In fact, I thought it was a nonsense word until I looked it up. I suspect it's only used perhaps in geography or something like this. Bellicose motives. Overcrowding is a hectic hindrance. The aforementioned insurmountable obstacle. This is how band 6 level students try to insert high-level words into their writing to boost their score, but it doesn't work. It means they're stuck still at the band 6. So it's not the right approach when it comes to learning vocabulary. The next problem is beliefs about writing. And again, a lot of this comes from the videos. Many of the videos show us teachers writing an essay live on camera or coming up with a very quick plan in just a few minutes. So it's not surprising that people reach the wrong conclusion about writing and how writing works. So this is a comment below one of these videos. Somebody wrote, by the way, your writing skills are incredible. A perfect band 9 essay in less than 5 minutes. I wish I could do that. Nobody can do that. And the conclusion that people reach is, so native speakers can just sit and write what they think. I'm going to show you now that this isn't true. The advice on these videos matches this idea that you can come up with a plan in 1 or 2 minutes. So we see things like, this is an essay plan, introduction, body paragraph 1 advantages, then the disadvantages, then the conclusion. This is a focus on form. It doesn't tell us how to actually do this or how this will work. and a paragraph plan. This is a typical paragraph plan that I see: topic, sentence, explanation, example. But students who follow this type of template produce writing like this. And this was sent to me by a native speaker stuck at band 6.5, educated all the way through high school and was up to university level, and reached out to me and said, I'm stuck at band 6.5 in my writing. And he'd been following bad advice about how to write a paragraph. This was his what he was producing. And I see this template a lot in band 6.5. So let's have a look at it. It says, to tackle this long-term problem, governments should provide a corporate tax incentive when they hire experienced people. That is to say that a lower income tax on the profits of companies would allow employers to hire the right people to perform the right job without the need to lower HR fees. For example, a similar initiative was launched by the United States government in San Francisco, California, which has resulted in Tesla's yearly corporate taxes to reduce by 35%. When people write like this, their thinking goes like this: I'll write a topic sentence, then I'll write an explanation. Now I just need to invent an academic sounding example to finish it. But just like this drawing, it looks like a paragraph and it looks great, but the sentences don't function in the way the writer intended. It doesn't work together. We can't follow the meaning, just as we can't drive this car. The result of this type of thinking and planning is 3 separate sentences that don't work together to form a clear argument. But also finishing with an example also means the paragraph feels unfinished. So if we look at that, the first sentence presents a possible solution to a problem, but this isn't a topic sentence. The next sentence doesn't explain that solution. Instead of explaining, it creates more confusion. Why would a lower income tax allow employers to hire the right people for a job? And how is this connected to the need to lower HR fees? So this isn't the explanation we were promised in the second sentence. It just adds more confusion. And this sentence here looks like an example, but it isn't an example that supports any of these previous ideas. It doesn't provide support. It doesn't provide an example of any of these ideas. And so it doesn't function as an example. So when the writer says a similar initiative, this would refer back to reducing income tax on the profits of companies. So it just adds more confusion. So again, this is just a very typical confusing paragraph that I see, which is what happens when native speakers just sit and write what they think. So nobody is at a level where they can just sit and write and think. Everybody has to spend time thinking and carefully planning what to write. If not, they score band 6.5. If your plan looks like this, the result is often a confusing argument like this one. And people who keep taking tests all the time, testing themselves and using the wrong materials and following the wrong advice, find that they struggle. They work really, really hard, but they struggle to move anywhere. And this is where all the frustration comes from. So something has to change if you want to change your score. So let's move on to the solutions. When we understand the problems, it's easier to see the solutions. And actually, we can divide these into 2 groups. The first 2 problems there are very easy to solve because they both come from using the wrong test materials. So that's the first solution. Make sure you're always using authentic test materials. If you're confused or unsure about something, check the evidence that you're using to support your ideas about Ielts writing. Or if you hear or see something, check the information. Check whether you can find an example of this in the real test questions. Again, you see them in books 9 to 16. Or check the information here. A lot of people start to mistrust this information because they see different information elsewhere. And if you start to do that, you're going to have a very difficult time trying to improve your score. It's very important to trust this information. So you also need to be prepared for when students question your advice. And I find this pushback a lot, and it's increasing actually. It's not going away. So when your students question your advice, always ask, where did you find this information or this question, or where did you see that? And this is a very common thing that I'm seeing now. But my friend says this was in the test last week. So they doubt when I say this isn't right and tell me, but it was in the test last week. My friend told me. Now, this is an increasing problem that I'm finding, because people who share their test questions after their test, they actually make big and small changes to the questions. And those changes are made based on the person's memory, their language level, their writing skills, how they interpreted the question, and their beliefs about Ielts writing. So this is typical of the kind of changes we see. So look at this test question. The growing online shopping trend is leading to shops in towns and cities being closed. Do you agree or disagree? The problem here is, again, we just have a statement. The growing online shopping trend is leading to shops in towns and cities being closed. That means there is no argument or position for you to agree or disagree with. Writing a clear argument and making your position clear are high-level skills, and many of the people who share their test questions don't know how to do this. So often they'll change or remove the argument in the question. This was actually an adaptation of a test question in book 15. So let's look at how the real test question works. The growth in online shopping will one day lead to all shops in towns and cities being closed. Do you agree or disagree? It takes a long time to create a question like this. They're very carefully edited to make sure they can be clearly understood and to make sure that they force you to use the right skills. But we're finding people very quickly sharing their test questions, and they don't have their skills to be able to present them in a way that will force you to use the right skills. So they're not good test materials to use at all. And this is another common example, a common problem when people write their own test materials. So the question says, fossil fuels, coal, oil, natural gas are the main sources in many countries, but in some countries, the use of alternative energy, wind energy and solar energy are encouraged. To what extent do you think it is a positive or negative development? The problem here is there is no development. Again, we just have a statement of fact. There is nothing positive or negative about this. There's no development either. So there's nothing for us to work with. We don't know what to make our position clear on. And this is possibly why I'm often asked this question. Is it okay to only write about the positive side of a development? We can't see a negative side here. So I do wonder if this is the reason people ask me this so much. My response is always, can you show me a test question in the Cambridge test books 9 to 16 where there is no positive and negative side to the development? These next problems are more difficult to solve. This focus on form and the beliefs about writing. And they're connected to language learning and to understanding how we develop skills like writing. So the next solution is to train students to be good language learners. It's actually much more helpful to see Ielts as like a mountain you need to prepare to climb rather than an obstacle in your path. You need to be familiar with the mountain to do the right preparation and to help you climb as high as possible. A language mountain would look more like this. The more skills you develop, the higher you can climb. At the beginner level, when you're learning the basics, you can make good progress, and it's more like climbing stairs than climbing a mountain. But at the intermediate stage, you can cope on a social level. However, progress slows down at this stage, and it's difficult to improve. You have to work much harder to climb any higher. This is a confusing and frustrating time, and it's important for students and teachers to understand that this happens to everyone. They aren't deliberately being held back at this level, which is what some people often feel as if that's happening to them. And we can see the advanced levels as more professional or academic levels. And reaching this level in any skill takes time and dedicated effort. There are no tricks, there are no secret passageways. And it can help to see this idea of skills and learning skills from the point of view of different skills. For example, learning a musical instrument or cooking skills. So I rate my cooking skills as band 6. So I have a social level of competence in cooking. I can cook well enough to feed my family, or if people come for dinner. But imagine how much more work I would need to do to become a professional chef. And so if you want to reach band 7 in English, you have to show mastery of these advanced skills, which are the skills you need to be able to work or study in English. And a large part of the problem is that many people who need to reach band 7 aren't natural language learners, and they don't know how to learn a language at a high level. In my free book, this is one of the main problems that I tried to address. So I try to show you how to study language at a high level so that you can improve and make progress in every part of the test. So we need to answer this question: how do we climb a mountain? And the answer to that is step by step. And this is what we mean by the idea of marginal gains, which is small improvements that build up on each other to make one larger improvement over time. And this idea of marginal gains is one that I learned from Matthew Side's book, Black Box Thinking, which I refer to quite a lot in my free book. I highly recommend you read it and encourage your students to read it if they're at high level. It's a great book and you'll learn a lot from it. And in the book, Matthew Side talks about being able to use failure to make success, and how to break down a large task into small manageable steps or goals, and then use deliberate practice to work on these steps or goals. And I used all of these ideas throughout my Key to IELTS series. These are just the first 2 books in the series. So let's look at how this works. And we can use the band descriptors to help achieve this in writing task 2. And this means that we can look at the current band, if you're now band 6, and the target band 7. And doing this, we can identify weaknesses. Some parts may be more fully covered than others. The conclusions may become unclear or repetitive. Some ideas may be inadequately developed. So these are the weaknesses. And we can set goals. We need to be able to present a clear position throughout the response, present, extend, and support main ideas. And we can link all of these together to show the kind of skill areas we need to work on, addressing all parts of the task, avoiding repeating the same ideas, come under the heading of thinking and planning skills. And these other skills here are all related to critical thinking and making an argument. And I'm going to explain this idea now. So in order to achieve all of this, you need to change your practice and focus on function and how things work instead of this focus on form that we just looked at. And to show the difference, when we focus on developing the right skills, we're focusing on function, which is the purpose of the words and the sentences we're using, instead of focusing on form, like this here. This is from a website which says it's going to show you a positive negative development essay in 15 sentences. That's a focus on form. Instead, we need to know how it works, how to develop these skills so that we can create an argument that actually works. And developing these skills is actually easier said than done because they're poorly understood even by native speakers. And it's much easier to focus on teaching complex grammar points and learning lists of less common words, which is why we see so much focus on that. When I was doing my research for my Key to IELTS Writing Task 2 book, I really wanted to understand these terms myself. What is an argument? How do we make an argument? And what is critical thinking? And to do that, I read several books about critical thinking, and I looked up, this is a part of a YouTube series of videos about making a logical argument. And I learned something really important from watching this series of videos. First of all, I learned that making a clear logical argument is a very difficult concept. This was more than 6 hours worth of lectures all about that one topic of how to make a clear logical argument. But I also learned from listening to the native speakers in the audience that native speakers struggle to make a clear argument when they don't use the correct language. So the lecturer gave the correct language: if X, then Y, X, therefore Y. But when she asked for examples and people didn't use the correct language or didn't use the language correctly, they produced very confusing arguments like this one. If blue chairs are comfortable and the chairs are blue, then these chairs are comfortable. There is no logic here. It's not clear, it's confusing. And this is what happens when you don't use the correct language. So this taught me an important lesson, that we can't separate the language we're using from its function. And when you're learning how to make an argument, you need to also focus on the language needed to do this at the same time. So that's why it isn't enough to focus on less common words, complex grammar, or to give simple sounding rules like this: make your position clear throughout, write a thesis statement, have one central topic, write a topic sentence, include a counter argument. This is a great list of rules, but it's only useful if you understand the concepts behind them and can actually apply them in your writing. This is form. Knowing how to do it is function, how to create this so that it actually works. If you focus on using only complex language and trying to avoid so-called simple language, this causes another problem. And this is a myth that I repeatedly have told to me, that we mustn't use words like firstly nowadays, some people believe, because they're too simple, or they're just fillers, or they're cliches. So people are trying to avoid using connectors like this. But if you see connecting words and phrases like these as simple or unnecessary, you're actually taking away an essential tool in making a clear argument. So the next solution is to actually develop these clear thinking skills so that you can develop a clear argument. And before we can start developing these skills, we need to understand what these terms actually mean. You can't produce a clear argument if you don't know what an argument is. So an argument is essentially the reasons why you believe something is true. So the reasons why you would agree or disagree with an opinion, the reasons why you think there are more advantages than disadvantages. And now you can see your whole essay is an argument. And critical thinking means evaluating an idea or argument and judging whether it's reasonable. So if we look at these two ideas together, you can see how important they are for writing task 2. If you don't use critical thinking when you're planning your essay, your argument and your position are likely to remain unclear. So when I was planning my book, I asked myself, how can we connect this idea of small goals and manageable steps in writing task 2 so we can make genuine progress? And I realized that the best way to do that was to work at the sentence level first. So this is an example. It's actually an example from the book, and it's also from a Band 6 essay I was sent. So this is somebody making an argument in one sentence. So it's a one-sentence argument. And we know it's an argument because we can separate it into an opinion or claim. Many people dislike sport, and the reason given for believing it. But if we then use our critical thinking, we can see that it's not logical. So because there are not many sports facilities in their area is not a logical reason to conclude that many people dislike sport. So this does not create a logical argument. And this is the type of writing that is unclear, with conclusions that are unclear, that we produce when we write without thinking. In my Key to Ielts Writing Task 2 book, the early lessons teach the language needed to make a clear argument. And although it might be familiar to students, they learn to see that language in a new way, how it functions. They learn to use what they know to make a clear argument. And there are interactive exercises to give deliberate practice to help understand these concepts. So they learn to develop the thinking skills as well as to produce an argument themselves. And the same applies to the counter-argument idea. You can only understand it. You can only produce this if you understand the concepts first, and then learn the language that you need to use. and then practice using that language to produce a counter argument. Once you understand the basics of making a clear argument at the sentence level, you can then build on this step by step. You could move on to paragraph writing, and then the different parts of an essay, such as writing an introduction. And then finally go on to produce complete essays. But again, marginal gains means doing this step by step. So the lessons go through the thinking process and getting ideas, planning and developing these ideas to produce an argument. And I show you a planning method you can use in any test question. And you can see the different stages in my own planning. So you can see how I developed my argument. And the model answers are then exploited to help students learn from them. And there are listening exercises to help students to focus on key skills, such as making your position clear, as well as focusing on the language. And so we can sum up all of these solutions with a reminder that you're being assessed on how you respond to the task. So this means that it's important to make sure you're training your students to respond to the right tasks. And it also helps if you teach your students to change the way they see materials. I often hear this, but I've finished all those. I need more. My test is next week. I need more tests. So because of this, they then start looking for the fast food equivalent. But this won't help you get fit enough to climb that language mountain we talked about earlier. So instead, you need to change the way you think about these test materials that you do have. Instead of I finished those, think like this: now that I've practiced my skills, I'm going to do that test again. And you can adopt this approach, which is a good, better, best approach. So students produce a good answer, and then with a focus on ideas and argument, they might produce a better answer. And then they might look at their answer and focus on clearer language to produce the best possible answer they can. So this idea of not just continually testing with fresh test questions, but looking again and reviewing is something very important, because there's always something new to learn, and reviewing and feedback are very, very important, especially in writing. At the end of each of the lessons in the book, there are extra practice activities that encourage the students to review and rewrite previous essays or paragraphs to help them do this. The next thing you need to do is to train students to respond naturally. I'm often asked this question, with to what extent do you agree or disagree questions. Is it better to agree or disagree? And this shows you someone who doesn't have an opinion. You need to have an opinion yourself to be able to present a clear position in your essay. So it's much better to respond naturally. Think about what your opinion is first, then that's the right way to answer it. If you continue to practice writing essays like this, so using this focus on form approach, you will continue to produce this type of writing where there's no development of ideas, and the position and conclusions are unclear, and the language is more difficult to understand. And you'll keep getting the same score. To produce this type of writing, where there's clear development of ideas, clear position and conclusions, and language is easier to understand, you need to add these important missing steps of thinking and planning, and change your thinking so that you communicate clearly. So this idea of what's the best way to explain that, rather than thinking, how many extra high-level words can I insert into this essay? Once you manage to do this, you'll start to reach those higher levels. And it's also important to change your approach to language learning. So if you set rules like this one, my teacher says I shouldn't use words like and or but or get because they're too simple. If you set rules like this, it means your students are limited in the test. And as we can see, even the so-called simple words can be used in a more sophisticated, higher level way once you've mastered the A1 to B2 levels. Here's get used in a B2 level meaning. So encourage your students to research different ways to use what they already know, and this will help them to be more flexible in the test. And this applies to grammatical points as well. So you'll only reach a higher level of language when you become interested in how to use words effectively, rather than looking for lists of less common words that are then used mechanically. So to sum up very quickly, my books and apps can help you learn the right skills and the right language. And my Writing Task 2 course helps you make real progress in the writing test. It has 16 model essays and takes you step by step through the thinking and planning and writing process. And up to 5 people can share it to keep the cost down. And you can also find me here. Contact me anytime if you have any questions about any of this. And you can find links to everything that I've shown you, including my free book, on my website, which is www.keytoielts.com. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing the screen now and take questions.
Pauline, can you please make me host back? I have made you a host for a while.
Okay, I don't know how to do this.
You go to the participants.
Yes,
part.
I've done it.
Okay, thank you. And there is a couple of questions coming from the live audience who are watching you from classes. Let me ask them first, and then we can turn to the chat box. Question number 1 will regard to the pretest.
Yes.
Pretesting. What do you think if they start working with the pretest? So what is your opinion about the pretesting?
It depends where the pretests come from.
No, the pretesting of Cambridge, official one.
The official one. Okay, so you mean if they're trying to get involved in pretesting?
Yes.
Is that right? It's a great idea, but don't reach conclusions about the test. Pretesting is a relatively early stage in the writing process. It's not a complete stage. Following the pretest, there is pretest review, there's more editing, there's a lot more work done. And at pretest, we work out what's working and what's not working. So you may well be working with a test that's not going to work, and it doesn't become a real test. So don't reach conclusions about the test from it, but absolutely you can use it. Sometimes you might come out thinking, wow, that was really difficult. And that's all it means. It doesn't mean the test has changed. It just means, well, that was good practice for me, but I found that a bit difficult. That's all it means. You can't really gauge anything about the test itself from pretests, but yes, they can be great. And at your school, schools can become involved in pretesting and so on. But again, don't reach conclusions about the test based on them.
Okay.
I believe you give it. Sorry, Mohammed. Is the question about your level? I do believe that people are given an idea of their level based on it, and that would be a very good indicator of your level in terms of the writing test. I'm not sure if I'm right on that. With people who attend those, they're given their writing level. That would be fair and a good indicator of your level. But it's only an indicator of your level when you're given a test question that it maybe is a bit difficult. So, it's not necessarily an indicator of how you would do with a test question that was a little bit easier or fairer or something like that, if there was a problem with the question, if you see what I mean.
Okay, the second question is about, you told that the one part of your book is free. I mean, the first book.
The free book, The Key to IELTS Success. I wrote that because people were saying to me, you need to make more videos, Pauline. And it takes about a week to make a good video that's useful. Even a 5-10 minute video takes about a week. And people imagine that there's some money that flows in when you make something like this from advertising. This isn't true at all. Somewhere I have a check for 50 cents, which is from Amazon for something, but that's about all I've ever received from anything. And there is no money that comes to people like me. You have to have 1 million viewers actually buying 10,000 things per video each day to actually make a little bit of money from videos. So I don't want to make more and more videos. That just means I'm spending all of my time doing something that actually I can't afford to do. I need to earn a living as well. So I also realized that people were then saying to me, make your videos shorter. Your videos are too long. And they wanted me to work harder so they didn't have to. And I thought, okay, the solution here is to put the work back on you. And so I said, instead of making shorter and shorter videos, I'm going to write a book. And if you're serious about IELTS, if you're serious about getting to these higher levels, you'll take the time to read the book and you'll take the time to do the work. And there are more and more people still contact me saying, we need more videos, we need more videos. Videos are the fast food equivalent of trying to sit back, watch videos, eat fast food and climb a mountain. They're not going to help you climb that mountain. So yeah, the free book was aimed at showing people how to study, because I realized people don't know how to learn vocabulary. So this is why they come up with these long lists of complex words and so on. They just add more and more and more language without understanding what to do with it. But also developing reading skills. A lot of people use the words skimming or scanning, but show that they don't know what those terms actually mean. So I try to show exactly what all of these skills mean and how to develop them so that you can become this higher level language learner. And that's the free book. I'm actually updating it at the moment, but there is a link on my website to it. I hope the updated one will be ready tomorrow. It's just an update to change my thinking about planning, which I changed when I was writing my second book.
So the question was where they can find it. I think you can send it to my email.
On my website, yes.
Communicate them. Can you please share the link to my email so I can forward?
Absolutely, yes. Yes, I will do.
Something called post-attendee email. So we will be sending emails for
Great.
all.
Yeah, I'll put the link there.
And the second question was also about where they can find your videos. So it will be good if you make one bundle of all the links which we can.
I will. Again, it's on my website, Mohammed. There, if you go on blog posts and you can search, there's a search function. Just search for videos. There's a whole page of them, but I'll send you the link anyway. Yeah.
Okay, fine. So, and another question concerning about speaking. What would be 3 quick advice that you would give for speaking? I don't think we can make long
you know, it's the same problem. Speaking and writing have the same problem. The focus is always on form, which is complex grammar and high-level words. Yeah, the focus is in the wrong place on this form because we feel like we're doing work when we're not. Yeah, we feel like we're going to be making progress by learning this high level and complex grammar and so on. Instead, learn how to use what you already know and focus on things like intonation, pronunciation, individual sounds, producing it in a fluent way and using it flexibly instead of adding more, which makes you feel as if you're working, but you're staying in the same place because you're just adding more tools, but you don't know how to use those tools in the exam. So my advice is to stop focusing on form and focus on, you know, you probably already have the right language and the language you need by now. A lot of the people that contact me will say to me, how quickly can I get to band 7? And nobody can answer this, but actually there are some people who can do it relatively quickly because they already have the language. They're just doing the wrong thing with it because they're following bad advice. Okay, so sometimes it can be a quick fix. I've had people say to me, they changed their reading score by 2 bands after reading my free book because they were using the wrong materials and following and not developing the skills. If you're using materials that just mean you can match vocabulary and sentence, then you're not developing the skills you need for the real test. So it's really about focusing your attention in the right way. And a lot of people possibly already have the vocabulary they need. In the free book, one of the things that I did was to say, okay, you need to work out what your problem is because everybody's problem is different. And some of you may have students who are band 5, and yes, sure, they need to work on building more. Band 5 and 6 does need to build more vocabulary, but there are people who are actually at those levels now in writing without realizing it because they already have. If you've got band 8 reading skills, for example, you have that vocabulary, you're just doing the wrong things with it. And the same applies to speaking. So it's about working out what your weakness actually is and then working on those in a deliberate way. The free book does have a chapter on speaking. There are 10 chapters in the free book, and the aim was to also give teachers ideas for what to focus on, because a lot of teachers now are suddenly told, okay, we need you to teach IELTS, and they may not feel confident about how to do that. They may not feel they know enough about the test. They're looking for information and going online and looking for information, but also not knowing how to be the authority in the classroom. Because often we have candidates now who are students they're demanding things like, I need more tests, I need this. And so the student then becomes the authority, the leader, and we need to reverse that. So I tried to give you lots of ideas for how to reverse that. So you can say with authority, no, actually, you need to stop testing, you need to start developing skills. This is how we're going to do it. So, and I think that works for speaking as well. So I tried to give as many ideas as possible for teachers or self-study students in the book for how to develop these skills, how to work on them without always just constantly testing yourself. Okay, sorry, I talk too much, Mohammed. Sometimes you just have to say stop.
No, it's good to have a longer answer. And also there is a question about, do you have any books for speaking, or if you don't have, what book would you recommend for speaking? And also question connected to speaking, and how can we improve our pronunciation?
Actually the BBC, I'll put it in the email, the follow-up email. The BBC has very good series of pronunciation videos on YouTube, and I'll send the link to that. So I would really recommend that. My 2 vocabulary books have a focus on pronunciation as well, if you use any of those. But I think the speaking one is a good question. So far, I've produced Key to IELTS Success, which is the free book, the Key to IELTS Writing Task 2. The next one, the one I'm currently working on, is Task 1. And I am thinking about whether it's possible to write a speaking based book. I do have some ideas for doing that, so I would like to do that in the future. But honestly, apart from the official guide, which has a very good section that shows you exactly what good candidates do, I think the official guide is probably one of the better skills sections for the speaking test. After that, it's about developing your language flexibly so you can cope with those types of questions. But use the right materials. For every part of the test, the same advice applies. Use the right materials. You know, people will say, how am I supposed to answer a question like this? And I always come back with, but where does the question come from? Because often it's not a question from a real situation.
And about pronunciation.
Yes, the BBC, as I said, I really recommend the BBC website for that, because when I looked at, when I was thinking, what would I put in that's different, I always look to see what's already available. There's no point in making something that's the same. So that's where I would point people to for pronunciation, definitely.
Okay, I think it's time for you to go. I don't want to, we have a couple of more questions. Would you like to continue, or would you like to have some?
We can continue a few more minutes. Yeah, that's fine. If you have the time, I have the time.
Yeah, we have a time. And now the question is interesting. The question is asking from YouTube that I passed IELTS general training several times and always got 6.5 in writing. However, when I passed IELTS academic, I easily scored 7.5 or even higher. How can we explain this discrepancy?
I didn't fully understand the first part. Mohammed, can you repeat the first part again?
I passed IELTS GT general training several times and always got 6.5. But taking academic module, I could score 7.5 or even higher. How could we explain?
I think I have the answer. I think, honestly, currently I'm working on writing task 1. And it's really surprised me. What I learned is that people are sending me sample answers that are much lower than I was expecting. So I asked a lot of people who are currently band 8 or 7 trying to get to band 8 to send me samples because I wanted some high-level examples as well as lower ones. I had lots of band 6 samples, but I wanted some at the band 7, and almost every one of them sent me a band 6 level answer. And so I started to realize that, okay, these people who are really trying hard to get to band 8, I think task 1 is a bigger problem than they realize. Because if you're trying to get to band 8, you can't get there with a band 6 task 1. Yeah, you can't have, it just doesn't work mathematically. So I think task 1 in general training may be part of the problem. If you've been preparing for academic writing task 1, I wonder what preparation is done for general training task 1, which is actually, I see a lot of problems in general training, and mostly it's because people don't take the task seriously. They don't see it as a real task. So they produce answers that don't work. You know, they talk about a solution to a problem that actually isn't logical or doesn't work. It's not about just sitting and writing. You have to have something meaningful to say. And also the tone, getting the tone right for general training task 1 is quite difficult. And, you know, people say to me, I'm not worried about task 1. It's easy. And that's not actually true. It might be a shorter task, but it certainly isn't an easy task. It's you know, band 8 still applies in both, or band 6 still applies in both. So don't dismiss a problem in task 1. I suspect it might have been the problem there. That's how I can explain that discrepancy based on what I've seen recently.
And there is another interesting question. So you're writing examiner, and of course you can distinguish what 6 and what 7 band actually means. But how about other candidates? How can they distinguish 7, 6, or 8? Because as a teacher, I can say myself, there are a lot of rubbish on the internet which says Ielts 9 band, but which they are not 9 band, of course. So how can a student, first of all, not just distinguish, but how can actually find about such scores?
Yeah, the official test books do a good job of showing you what different bands, but probably don't go far enough. You know, it'd be nice to have more of that sort of information. From the student point of view, it's very difficult. I think they need the guidance of teachers. You know, when I write my books, I'm not trying to replace teachers at all. Actually, my aim, I would like to empower teachers more. I want to pull myself away from the student level because I can't answer all the questions. I can't give the feedback that everybody needs. We need to empower the teachers more. So for me, it's about giving teachers that knowledge so they can pass it down to students, and then students can find the right teachers. And from the teacher point of view, I have been asked that question as well, Mohammed. How do I know? And the answer to that is the same as all of us, and what we had to do. So for example, when I was a language teacher, I worked in a college where we had every level from we had, you know, a large number of students, and they were at every single level. And when I was a teacher at, for example, band 4, I become an expert in what band 4 is. And when I move up to the next level in my teaching, I'm suddenly seeing this level of language. And it's only years of experience of working with each level that we fully understand what that level is. It's not something you can suddenly switch on. Yeah, it's so you understand what band 6 is after you've taught at that level. Looking at band 6 candidates for a year, you fully understand what band 6 is. And so it's moving between the different bands as a teacher that will show you what that band can produce. Sorry, I need a drink of water.
No, it's okay. And where candidates can find 9 band samples? It's the question from the audience.
That's a great question. Sorry, my book. My book. I realized the problem with sample answers and model answers, again, when I was preparing for the book. Before I wrote my book, people would say to me, we need models. And I never liked writing models because I was worried that people would just learn them, try to copy them for a test. And that's not how writing works. And also there are so many different ways to answer a question. There isn't just one way. There aren't even just 5 ways. You know, there are unlimited number of ways to answer any question. Every time I write a new answer to the same test question, I do it differently. So there are unlimited ways. So I didn't like the idea of producing a sample answer. But when I was doing my research for the Writing Task 2 book, I realized that actually the sample answers that are available are a huge part of the problem. So we have a lot of sample answers that label themselves band 9 that are not band 9, and they show band 6.5 skills almost all of the time. And then we have the model answers produced in the test books, which I call the invisible band 10. And I say that because for me, these are very highly polished answers, not produced in exam conditions. So the ones that are produced by an examiner, they're produced for printing in a book, and nobody wants to print something that might have a little problem here or a little problem there. It has to be highly polished, but that also creates this invisible band 10 is what I refer to it as. It becomes more subtle as it gets shorter, and we can't see exactly how to do it. So I then had to go and look at myself and say, okay, let's produce band 9, just band 9. What would I produce in the test? And I was really shocked to find I could not produce a band 9 in 40 minutes using my old way of planning and thinking. My old ways of planning and thinking were based on me writing for publication, which means I'll write something. The next day, I'll look at it again. I'll change something here and there. An editor has a look and we say, maybe add this. And then all together, we finally produce something. Now, we can't do that in a test situation. And this is why I say you can't just sit and write. And actually, none of us do this. We don't just sit and write. Nobody writes in this way, not unless they want to produce this nonsense that we saw earlier. That's just groups of words and groups of sentences. It doesn't form paragraphs or essays. So I realized I had to go back to the start, and I had to think, okay, in a test situation, how can I produce task response and coherence and cohesion? And that's where my problems were. I could produce band 9 of grammar and vocab, no problem. It's task response, coherence and cohesion that are problems when you don't think and plan enough. And in the book, I came up with a method of planning because I realized, okay, this is the way you need to think to be able to do that in a test situation. So my book teaches you a way of thinking and planning that helps you develop ideas, get ideas and develop ideas. Because people often say to me, I don't know how to get ideas in the test. And that's a huge problem, which leads to them just writing and writing and often writing the same thing over and over. So I show people how to think and how to plan to develop a clear argument and a clear essay in a test situation. I'm just going to draw this, the sun's in my eyes. So does that answer the question about band 9? There are 16 band 9 essays, and I gave them to 2 examiners. I did them in test conditions, as in the time. And if I couldn't do it in the test conditions, I put it away and came back and did it again. And that's how I managed to do it. And at first, my planning and thinking had to be really quite slow as I learned how to do it. But then after the first few times, by the time I was doing the last, so I wrote 16 altogether. By the time I was doing the last 6, and it's continued to now, I can now plan much faster. I'm much more confident in what I'm doing. So doing this and practicing it, these steps over and over will eventually help you to produce something that you feel confident in and that will improve your score. And I've had people contacted me since showing me they've finally, one person I've been talking to recently, and she's really thankful she finally got her band 8 score. She's now aiming for band 9. So it can make a big difference.
And what do you think are differences in task response between 8 and 9?
I do explain that in the book. The other thing that I tried to do is to show you how to change a band 6.5 essay to create a band 8 or 9 essay. And often we don't get as far as band 9 from it because there's something missing. And what's missing in task response is the development. And so I do show you that in the book. So I think there are 2 occasions where we create a band 8, we change a band 6.5 response and make a band 8 response from it. And then I show you why it's not band 9. And then I show a band 9 equivalent for that. So I do try to help you to see the difference between those.
And similar questions goes to the task achievement in writing task 1.
Mm.
What are the differences there between 8 and 9?
It's more difficult in task 1, I think. But it is about I'm in the middle of writing this book. This is why I don't have an answer like this. It's really about how well you managed to summarize. And so it's a lot more difficult. It's all about really succeeding. So, something significant with task 1 is that we do call it task achievement and not response. And that's something that's very important. In task 2, you'll respond. It's about your response to the question. And task 1 is about achieving it. And so the difference between 8 and 9 is how well were you able to achieve those things that you were asked to do, which is summarizing, highlighting, and presenting the key features, with a very clear overview. It's about how well you achieve that. That's the difference between 8 and 9. But it's very difficult. It's difficult to explain. I'm hoping I'll be able to show it, but I haven't finished it yet, so I don't know.
The next question is also connected to this about overview statement. Question says, I know that overview statement is important, but I always struggle writing a clear overview statement. What I write ends up to be something very confusing or too detailed. What can you advise?
Definitely, that's the biggest problem. The 2 big problems that I'm seeing are task achievement, it's overview and highlighting. It's not just about the overview that's a problem. That's only one part of your answer. So the key features, highlighting the key features, is the other important aspect of task achievement that I'm seeing problems with, even at the higher level candidates. The overview, it's difficult again to sum it up very quickly, but the overview must give us the big picture, a big picture of what the whole thing is showing us, and looking at the trends, the patterns and trends that you can see. And so there mustn't be details in it, because a detail is not a trend, if you see what I mean. There's going to be a whole lesson just on overview and just on highlighting, because those are very important problems that I'm seeing a lot of. The other important problem, again, it's similar to task 2. Coherence and cohesion is a big problem in task 1 that I'm seeing. And I don't think people realize that the 2 biggest problems I'm seeing is using the same cohesive devices that they would use in task 2 as if they can be used anywhere. And that isn't true. It doesn't work the same way. So those cohesive devices need to fit. So you can't always just put nevertheless in, or meanwhile, and words like this. So sometimes they're inappropriately used. But the other problem, the bigger problem with that I'm seeing with coherence and cohesion is development. There is no development. And again, that's a difficult thing to explain really quickly, but there needs to be development within your task 1 answer. I need to be able to follow this story of what you're telling me. And that's what development means. And often there is a list of facts and details and not a development of a whole answer. So coherence and cohesion might be more of a problem at the higher levels as well than people realize in task 1.
And which books do you recommend for writing task 1?
Mine, but it's not out yet. I don't know one. Honestly, I only write a book because there's a gap. There's no point. If there was a really good book, I would recommend it. And when you see that there's a gap, that's the point, is to fill that gap, because there's a need for it. I do think the new book will be very helpful. It's going to have probably probably up to 20 lessons again. The focus, rather than in task 2, I spent the first 9 lessons looking at the different features of how to do it. But that's because writing task 2 is very complex and much longer. And there's a lot to undo. There are a lot of problems to undo in writing task 2. Writing task 1, I think I should be able to teach the main features in the first 3 or 4 lessons. And then after that, it's going to be about model answers and teaching people to be precise with their writing, because it's a lot more about using language in a precise way. I think I need to focus more on vocabulary and grammar and using them in a precise way in the task 1 book than I have had to in the task 2 book. So there's going to be as many lessons, but they'll just focus on what we're trying to do within each model answer after that. And of course, I'll be looking at all the different types. Yeah.
Okay, and the last question, I think it's high time to end. How to find questions of writing task 1 and task 2?
Again, it's really, really important to only use the test books. Even if you've done them all before, keep having another go, do them again. Because if you look online, the biggest problem that I can see is sometimes with task 1, you'll find questions that don't have enough data. If there's not enough data, then you're practicing describing everything. And instead you must select key features and only describe those. So you're doing the wrong kind of practice if you're using these materials you find online. And I talked about people coming out of the test and sharing their answers, sharing their questions. But people, you can't remember a task 1 and what was included in it. And so often we get these confusing mixtures of data that people have shared where there's not enough information, or we're not sure how it works together. And those key features are very important and must be very clearly in the data. So if you're using the free materials you find online, that's not a good idea at all. I would only use the materials you find, especially if you're trying to do test practice. Only use the test books from 9 onwards. There are some of the lower books, some of the earlier books might have useful materials as well. I only have some of those, but I'm going to go through and see which ones I would recommend for using now. The test changed, you see, back in 2007, I think. And so some of the earlier materials don't reflect the way the test is now. So that's why the older test books are not necessarily useful.
So thank you a lot, Pauline Cullen, and
no
many are asking when will be the task 1 masterclass similar like this, because it's very useful for many teachers, because now sure. I see among attendees there are a lot of teachers of IELTS and the general teachers who are interested to take the IELTS test, also candidates, future test takers.
Yes.
So let me express and extend the gratitude from all of us,
Thank you.
From Uzbekistan, for a wonderful presentation.
And thank you, Mohammed, for for inviting me and for arranging it, for all your hard work. I'm hoping the task 1 book, I'm going to do it a bit differently to task 2. With task 2, it took me a long time to write because I had a lot of learning to do myself. I was really surprised, and that made me stop and start again. But with the task 1 book, what I want to do is actually release it early. So I'm going to, because the books are available online, so that's how you read it. You sign in, you log in to your account, and you read the book online on different devices, on up to 5 devices. And so because of this, I can add and change anything. So I'm hoping to release the first 3 or 4 lessons early, as early as end of September or the beginning of October. And then, so people can buy it and start working on it. And then I will add new materials each week. So that's what I'm planning to do with the task 1 book. Please don't send me a message saying, have you finished yet? I'm asked that question a lot. I'm doing my best. And no, it's not finished yet. But I would like to release the first 4 lessons if I can, if not the first 3 lessons, and then more each week for anybody who's keen to get started. If you have a test coming soon, and up to 5 people can share it. I'm very conscious of the cost and trying to help people afford the book and so on. So 5 people are welcome to share it. You just contact me anytime you have any problems. So I'm always available on any of those social media platforms or by email. So anything else?
It was a wonderful masterclass. Thanks a lot for your time.
I'm very glad to take part, and thank you again for listening. Hard work for you as well as for me to keep talking. So I apologize for too much talking.
Okay.
Okay. So, thanks, Mohammed. Thank you.
Dear participants, we would like to say thank you for your participation, for your time to take from on my behalf and on behalf of Pauline Cullen.
Yes.
We were just happy to talk to you and deliver and extend a wonderful presentation. I hope you like them. And soon you'll get a follow-up email about our webinar, and you'll have a recorded version if you want to rewatch some of the parts. And if Pauline can possibly send her presentation, so if you skip some of the part, we can bundle them in our emails alongside with all useful links that she'll be sharing with us. So thanks a lot for everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.